Caleb Williams should just quit on those sorry Trojans. He's going to the NFL, so why even play the rest of the season? Let's talk about it.
FanBuzz Weekly starts now.
Hey everyone, what's going on? You are watching FanBuzz Weekly. I am your host, Patrick, with my co-host, Will, the college football aficionado. We have a good show lined up for you guys today, and I'm just going to jump right into it with arguably the biggest storyline from this past weekend. USC losing again. Their national championship hopes are probably done. I think we can say for the most part. And Caleb Williams, it feels like the Heisman Trophy is a long shot. Will, do you think Caleb Williams should sit out the rest of the season? Make a business decision, take that first overall pick, not risk injury. What do you think?
Yeah, if I'm Caleb Williams, that's about it for me this season. I mean, there's nothing that Drake or JJ McCarthy, I guess is the other guy we're talking about at this point, can do to get them above Caleb in this year's draft. I mean, and if you're Caleb, how important is it to be picked first overall? He's even talked about refusing to play for whoever does end up drafting him and just going back to school anyhow. So I don't think there's anything he can gain from the rest of the season. He's not getting a Heisman again. He's not getting to the playoff, and he's going to get picked first or at worst second overall either way, giving him the same career opportunity. So the only thing that can happen if he keeps playing is an injury. So unless it's about pride or something, I would sit it out and just play for the NFL.
Yeah, I think this notion that like NFL teams or scouts or whoever, would sort of deduct points from his whatever, his resume, his whatever, or his character because he sits out. I think that's like a load of crap, in my opinion. And one name that sticks out to me who, got hurt in a bowl game, missed out on probably $20 million was that linebacker at Notre Dame, Jalen Smith. When you think of an instance like that, it would just be a heartbreaker for Caleb Williams in one of these games that really doesn't mean anything, the rest of the USC schedule. It'd be a heartbreaker for him to just lose out on all that money. And I'm sure, he's making plenty of money with NIL at USC, but I'm sure his ultimate goal is, to be the first overall pick, to get that huge contract. And it would just be, it would just be such a shame. Yeah,
we've seen a lot of guys miss out on deals because sometimes they had to keep playing, but sometimes they didn't. Like, I'm a Stanford guy. I always go back to my snake-bitten Stanford almost Heismans, but Bryce Love, not Bryce Young, he was a runner-up. He ran for well over 2,000 yards in a season, electrifying speed, second in the Heisman voting. Probably would have been a day 2 pick, early day 2. Dude came back for one more year for basically no reason other than he wanted to keep playing for Stanford. Got hurt, became terrible, and you haven't heard from him since. So I'm not saying he would have had a long NFL career, but his first contract would have been life-changing.
Speaking of Bryce Love, yeah, I remember I looked up like a couple weeks ago what he was up to, and I guess he's just never been the same since that injury, which, like, imagine if Caleb Williams, tore his ACL and could never play football the same way. I mean, how groundbreaking that would be for the sport.
Yeah, obviously it's a little different in terms of how much athleticism factors into your game when you're a quarterback versus you're a running back. I mean, Bryce was just a speed dude and he lost his burst. But, in that same vein, Caleb could get an elbow injury or a shoulder injury, and who knows how that could affect him, or, God forbid, even worse, a head or neck injury, and that can affect any person, let alone a football player. So if I'm Caleb, I've played my last snap for USC. It's an unserious football team this year, and they're pretty much done team-wise.
I agree with that. Moving on to a big rivalry this weekend. That's the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. I don't care that people have tried to cancel that name or got rid of that name. I'm talking Florida, Georgia. And yes, by the way, it is Florida, Georgia, not Georgia, Florida, because some people like to be, sticklers about that. I'm going to put it out there. Do you think Georgia, who, has been kind of, I feel like they've been kind of coasting a little bit. They haven't looked great at times. Do you think they're in trouble? Do you think they're on upset alert against Florida?
I don't think so. I'm not that high on this Florida team personally, although I am excited for this game. I mean, we're looking 84 in Jacksonville. We're looking perfect cocktail weather. But I'm saying no chance on the actual upset. I actually like Florida to cover if we're looking at it from a betting perspective, but covering doesn't actually mean it's close or competitive. I expect Georgia to lead the entire way. They're just going to run the ball down Florida's throat. They have the 20th best rush EPA in the country, 64th against the run for Florida. So it's a fine run defense, but Georgia's physicality is going to be a problem. And I just don't think, Graham, you need to make plays in all phases of the game to pull off an upset of a team like this that hasn't lost in 2 years. I don't think Graham Mertz has been great at taking what's given to him, which is going to be some underneath stuff, which is going to help Florida stay in this. But he's going to have to take the top off against a top 10-ish pass defense at some point if they want to actually outright win in Jacksonville, and I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think the positive here is that Graham Mertz is coming off the best game of his career against South Carolina. So, that's kind of the only saving grace I'm holding on to here. So I think there's a shot, and I think you're right about covering for sure. I think that line opened up at 3 touchdowns, and then it immediately went down to 2.
Yeah, it's 14.5. You have to get that. I think you need that key half point to keep it within 2 touch. I wouldn't be betting 13.5 either way, I don't think, but 14.5 is a great number for this game. 21's crazy.
Yeah. And I'm gonna end how we talk about this with a quote from the greatest trash talker of all time, Steve Spurrier, who once said about Georgia, I sort of always liked playing them that second game because you could always count on them having 2 or 3 key players suspended, which has been a sort of a central theme for this Georgia team over the last, year and a half or 2 years. Just had to get in some trash talk for my Georgia fans out there. Moving on to another major program, Texas, who now has a QB problem with Quinn Ewers' injury, that shoulder injury. The timeline is a little bit uncertain right now. It doesn't sound like it's season ending. But in the meantime, they've either got to go to Arch Manning or Maalik Murphy. So who do you think the Longhorns should turn to?
I think that they've already announced just minutes ago that they're going to be splitting reps at practice throughout this week between those 2 guys. But I think they will do Murphy. The indications are that if the game was today, it would be Murphy. But the game's not tomorrow. Murphy's been the guy in relief of Quinn in really limited situations. I think he's thrown 8 passes so far. Arch has not touched the turf in a game so far. So I think if you want to win, you got to stick with the guy who has some limited experience with the offense, who's been in the building for a year longer. Arch maybe is the guy if you really think things are over without Quinn and you want to start investing in the future, because I think the indication is that he's clearly going to be the guy in Austin. But I'd be going with Murphy. It should be fine either way against this BYU team, but the Quinn situation is going to be a huge deal going forward, because this is still a team with college football playoff I don't want to say championship opportunities, but they have a chance to make it in. So it's going to be important to see how they handle this going forward.
I'm not going to lie. I want Arch for the simple fact that I'm going to this game this weekend. So the hype around Arch Manning, all kinds of signs, it's Arch freaking Manning, right? But I don't think it should be him. I think Maalik Murphy, to me, he's got a better body made for the SEC right now. The dude is 6'5", 240 or something. It reminds me of an Anthony Richardson body. And plus the fact that Arch in that spring game was not great tells me that he's not going to play this season, and he shouldn't play this season. And I think it's totally fine, because I think you're right. He's going to be the guy one day.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about Murphy having the physical tools. At the very least, when you're not polished or seasoned or ready to go, it's great to have that to lean on. He also, if we want to really reach back, he probably played in a better high school league out in California as compared to we've seen some of the film of Arch playing in Louisiana. Louisiana is a great football state in a lot of ways, but Arch played some teams that he probably shouldn't have been on the same field as. So I think Murphy's probably a little bit more ready, but honestly, as an investment in the fuare, I would not hate to see Arch. They brought him there for a reason.
Yeah, Arch in high school looked like, the next coming of Mike Vick, the way he was able to run the ball. And it's who are we playing here? Who are these teams? Moving on to Alabama, the Crimson Tide just had a major comeback, against Tennessee. I think it was the largest comeback at home in 25 years against the Vols. After a sloppy start, they got it together. Jalen Milroe got it together. Do you have high hopes for Alabama's CFP chances?
Listen, it's been the same story since they lost to Texas. They have to win out, including a win over Georgia. And not that they couldn't make it in as 11-2 of the SEC championship, but I don't think they're getting there if they lose another game, because they would probably beat LSU and they'd lose that head-to-head, and then they're in a lot of trouble that way. So this team needs to make it to the SEC championship game. They need to beat Georgia. They're not gonna miss if they win it, and there's no way they're gonna make it if they don't. And frankly, I'm not sure they were ever going to make it if they didn't win the SEC this year. It's just not that year, not that SEC, not that Alabama. But how do I feel about them actually getting there and then beating Georgia? It's a more vulnerable Georgia team than expected. As far down as Alabama is compared to what they usually are, it's still a good team. Georgia's going to be missing Brock Bowers, their most explosive offensive playmaker, but I just don't think Alabama has the guys in the trenches to make it a game on the Alabama offensive side of the ball, which is a weird thing to say about Alabama, but they don't have the linemen. Chase McClellan hasn't been like your stereotypical Alabama running back who just goes out and runs through people or runs by them. I don't think they're going to get it done, but they still have a path, which is more than a lot of teams can say at this point. It's all in front of them. It's all in their control. And when things are in Nick Saban's control, it's kind of dumb to bet against him. So I would not rule them out at all.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I mean, look, they've got LSU, Kentucky, Auburn. And the hardest one there is LSU, and they get them at home. I don't really see them tripping up here. I see them winning out. And I'll take them beating Georgia for the simple fact that it's Nick Saban. And like you said, I don't bet against Nick Saban. And I don't know. I don't know. I think I've been warming up to Jalen Milroe. If you actually look at his stats compared to some of the SEC quarterbacks, I mean, they're not like they're good. Like they're actually pretty good. I think we've seen some inconsistency throughout the season, but like these next 4 games or whatever it is, I think they're going to be a big tell in terms of whether or not they have a shot against Georgia. But like you said, we've seen Georgia, struggle at times. Even against Auburn, right? I think that was a close game, or at least a closer game than we were expecting. So yeah, I mean, I think Alabama's fine, but I'm excited for that Georgia game. We know, the Nick Saban, Kirby Smart storyline is always fun to see. I don't know. I'm ready for it. Speaking of a team that is going the other direction, I think we could say UNC completely fumbled the bag against arguably one of the worst teams in the Power Five, right, in Virginia. It was the Cavaliers' first ever road win against a top 10 team, and it came against a Heisman hopeful in Drake May. Are his Heisman shots gone now? And can UNC, kind of come back from this and still make a New Year's Six bowl?
Yes and no. I mean, Drake's done. His stats haven't been where they would have needed to be to win a Heisman out of the ACC on a team that's not like an inner circle contender. I still think his draft stock is as high as it's ever been. He wasn't particularly terrible in that game. There were some rough drops, but man, I'm upset at UNC. I was high on this team after they went over Miami. Devontae Walker comes back, snags 3 touchdowns, and secures a huge onside kick. Thought this team had a lot of juice. They were playing with some fire after the NCAA tried to ruin their season for literally no reason. I still can't understand what happened there. But yeah, Drake's out of the Heisman race, but can UNC make the New Year's Six? Yes. Can they make the playoff? Yes. They might need a little help. They can't have 4 undefeated champions in the other leagues, but we're talking about the Pac-12 producing a 0 or 1 loss champ. That never happens, especially not undefeated. We're talking about Texas and Oklahoma. They're not inner circle contenders, and Michigan and Georgia are already locked in pretty much, or Ohio State and Alabama, 1 team from each conference. So nothing that can be done about that. They already control their destiny pretty much in the ACC. If they win out and make it to the conference championship, they'll have wins over Duke, Clemson, and presumably Florida State. So that's a strong enough finish and a 12-1 record that they have a playoff resume. The other side of the coin of losing to bad teams is that you didn't miss an opportunity to pick up a big win. Sometimes I say the biggest issue with a loss is that you didn't get that win on your resume piece. Alabama versus Texas, for instance, didn't hurt them in the SEC, but now they don't have that feather in their cap that they beat Texas. So North Carolina didn't miss out on a thing in terms of Virginia being a resume point. It's kind of giving me the vibes of 2014 Ohio State, even though it's later in the season. They lost that game to Vatech, but they went out and beat every single team in a tough Big Ten, and it looked great on their resume. So I think that North Carolina will win the ACC. I think they will make a New Year's Six bowl. The question is, will it be the playoff? I don't know. We'll have to see. If Florida State's undefeated and North Carolina knocks them off, they've got a narrative.
All right, moving on to America's team, the Colorado Buffaloes, and Deion Sanders. It's really taken a turn for the worse this season. They're ranked dead last in total defense. Their hopes of making a bowl game might be dead too. Can they come back from the dead, full zombie style, against UCLA?
Yeah, talk about coming back from the dead. And Ethan Garbers was 6 feet under, and he is back. Dante Moore had a really tough couple of games for UCLA. Garbers is back. He had a really good game against Stanford, and I think it might be a positive for UCLA going forward. As talented as Dante is, he's clearly not ready, and he would have given Colorado the opportunity to get back into this with some turnovers and shortening the field. With all that being said, I don't think that it's going to happen with Garbers, and they could make it a game to a degree. I mean, Stanford, it looked like a blowout, but I watched that whole game because I put myself through Stanford games every weekend. And if it weren't for a huge amount of penalties and just a couple of plays that went the wrong way, Stanford, they would never have won, but there would have been way more in it than 42-7 or whatever it ended as. 42-6, I think they missed an extra point. But Colorado's not going to win, but they could make it a game. The issue is the defense is a total joke, and Garbers will be able to at least be mistake-free and move the football. And the offense on the Colorado side has slowed tremendously. I mean, the Arizona State game, they didn't do much. Stanford, they scored a bunch, but a lot in overtime. They completely shut down in the second half. So UCLA has a top 10 defense by almost every single metric, and that's in the whole country. So it's really hard to imagine, like, the amount of time Shedeur holds the football. It's hard to imagine him not getting taken down. It's hard to imagine them establishing the run. And on the other side, it's impossible to imagine them slowing down Carson Steele. So UCLA is just going to grind this one out and win. I think Colorado's in a lot of trouble as far as bowl eligibility.
I mean, what is the ugliest monster you can think of in Halloween? Is it like a Frankenstein or some like grotesque witch? I think that's the rest of Colorado's season. They have 3 more ranked games. Like you've already said, it's getting uglier and uglier. Literally dead last in the NCAA, giving up 473 yards per game. And now they have UCLA, who kicked the crap out of Stanford, who, Colorado gave up, 46 to Stanford. I don't think this one's going to be close. And, I'm worried for Dion. I know the program as a whole is going in the right direction. We're talking about season to season trajectory, but I think this one's ugly. I don't know if you want to go with a witch, you want to go with a Frankenstein, you want to go with a zombie, whatever it is. I think Colorado fans have a lot to be spooked about.
Yeah, it's tough. They got off. It's hard to call it a failed season because they killed their win total fast, but yeah, they might be buried going forward. I wanted to see this team go bowling, and I think it's unfortunate that they're in such a kind of a haunted house of a Pac-12. It's an absolutely brutal conference this year. I think this team in last year's Pac might go bowl eligible pretty comfortably. But, I think that you're right about the conference moving in the right direction. They're going to the Big 12, so they're literally moving in a different direction. They're going east, and they're playing worse teams. Texas and Oklahoma are going to be gone. I think Colorado can be, if they have a good winter and summer in terms of recruiting and the transfer portal, which Dion loves, they could be a top half team in that conference, which is not a special one. So they're going in the right direction, but close your eyes and I don't know, just go trick-or-treating or something this weekend.
Speaking of the Pac-12 haunted house, which is about to be knocked down, I guess, if you want to keep going with that metaphor, we're going to move on to I'm So Over It, the segment where we pick the over and explain why. I'm staying in the Pac-12. I'm going to take Oregon, Utah. I think it was at 49.5 when I saw it. I know Utah has a good defense, but Oregon is, they're one of the best scoring teams in the country, putting up 47 a game. And Utah's offenses came around. I think they've put up 34 their last 2 games. This feels like a no-brainer to me in the Pac-12. I'm not really a betting man, but if I were, I'm sticking in the Pac-12 this week. What do you think?
That was a little scary to me. Bucky Irving, Oregon superstar running back, his status is a little bit up in the air. Just scares me a bit against a defense like Utah, but it could go over in a heartbeat. If we want to stick in the Pac-12, I'm leaning on the over in Oregon State at Arizona. Number is 56.5. Yeah, these are some pretty solid offenses. Arizona's been a surprisingly competent football team, and they have defensively too, but I'm a little more inclined to believe that that's a mirage based on who they've played. The other one that I'm kind of looking at is Ole Miss has been an overwagon for me this year. The SEC is an overwagon because people still believe that it's this conference of hard-hitting football, but it's not. It's not the Big Ten's little cousin. It's the Big 12's older cousin. It's just a gunslinger, fire the ball down the field type of league this year. I think LSU's on bye, so there goes my biggest overwagon. But Ole Miss, man, they've been on one top 20 passing offense, almost top 20 total offense, and they play Vanderbilt. Number is 63.5. I think Ole Miss gets into the 50s all on their own, and their defense has been questionable enough, 67th in the nation by EPA, that Vandy might actually be able to even score some points. They scored 20 on Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. So over 63.5, Vandy and Ole Miss. I don't see why not. These Commodores have a little bit of life to them.
I was going to say, what if Ole Miss just puts up 63 themselves? Boom, there you go.
They could. That's definitely not impossible, but I don't love betting on the one team over when it's literally in the 60s. So I think Vandy actually might be able to chip in a few. Ole Miss's defense is the one thing that's keeping them from being a real contender. So maybe it'll come back to bite them just a little bit.
I love it. Moving on to, did you see this? We're going to pick one thing that we saw, whether it be this weekend or recently in college football, something that, maybe not everyone has seen. I'll start first. This happened yesterday, revolving around Jim Harbaugh. I know there's a lot going on with Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. He was on a radio show in which he said, I thought this was a fake quote at first. He goes, if we go undefeated, I'm going to get a 15-0 tattoo, probably on the shoulder, and a block M over it. Like, just the thought of Jim Harbaugh putting this tattoo on his shoulder and maybe wearing, like a shirt that shows it off at a game one time is just like sending me right now. Just the visual alone with his khaki pants, how he usually is, but he has this tattoo on his shoulder. I love that. I'm kind of here for it. I hope Michigan does run the table just so this happens.
I mean, I definitely hope Michigan runs the table. I think it'd be really interesting to see. I mean, there's no way that opponents aren't changing their signs at this point, and there's no way we're going to continue doing whatever it was. Whether or not it was illegal, they're going to shy away. So if we go 15-0, that would just be the ultimate end to this whole saga. It would be like kind of like the Patriots after the Deflategate, going out and winning 3 of the next 5 Super Bowls, breaking records in every single Super Bowl they played. So it'd be a little bit of fun. Would love to see Coach Jim hit the tattoo parlor. I'm sure that social media would have a field day with it. For my Did You See This? I've got a couple different ones. One is the under of the century. I don't know if anyone saw the all-time lowest total in a college football game, 30.5 points you could bet on for Minnesota and Iowa, and they covered the under comfortably. Minnesota won without scoring a touchdown. They won 12-10. They snapped an 0-8 loss streaks that dated back to 1999 in that rivalry. Not much of a rivalry, but it's a Midwestern classic, and it played out in Midwestern fashion. The other two I'm looking at are more highlight plays. Ashton Daniels, touchdown to Tiger Bachmeier. Absolutely crazy play. If it was Caleb Williams, it would have been all over SportsCenter top 10. Also, maybe if Stanford wasn't already losing by 40. But absolutely gorgeous play. Go check it out. And then lastly, in a game that was a little more meaningful, it looked like Alabama was actually sunk. They might have been in trouble if they lost to Tennessee. But that one of the last plays of the first half, it felt like they hit the wrong button on their PlayStation remote calling plays in NCAA, the greatest upcoming video game of all time. But they went engage 8 almost on the goal line and just let Joe Milton flick it out into wide open space. Just a bizarre moment from a team that's usually really well coached in a big spot. Those were my big 3 moments from the weekend. I know we're only looking for one, but it's just an action-packed couple days of college football.
And we're not going to talk about how I picked the over in that game, in the Minnesota-Iowa game. We don't need to talk about it. We're going to move on from that, and we're going to focus on these overs and our new Did You See This? That's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Also, sign up for our newsletter. The link is in the description. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week for FanBuzz Weekly. I'm Patrick, and this is my co-host, Will. Bye, guys.
He took an Iowa
in Minnesota. Ethan Calamacanis is holding your money this weekend.
I just found the lowest mark I could and just tried to create a reason why. That's pretty much all I did.